Welcome back to Fresh Thinking, the show where we turn hard-won project into practical tools you can use. So I'm your host, Greg. I'm a senior consultant with Snowden Optiro. Today, we are going to talk about the cost estimation. With me is Hamish, our managing consultant at mining department. Hamish has more than 30 years of mining experiences. Welcome, Hamish.
Thanks, Greg.
Okay, let's set up the saying. So what is cost estimation and what is its role in various mining studies?
Yes, so cost estimation is in all studies. All studies have a link to costs. I guess the difference between studies as we progress them through the study pipeline is the accuracy. So we may typically use desktop or scoping level studies, more in the way of benchmark and sort of previous studies and sort of internal databases. And as we move towards feasibility studies and operating plans, then we're more reliant on operational costs or costs from contractors or first principle at a high accuracy. So all studies have a cost estimation piece. It's critical to understand the cost of an operation to assess it properly.
Okay, cool. And so let's break down that by different phases. So, for example, for the scoping or preliminary economic analysis, what's the level of the accuracy for the cost estimation, and where do we get the data?
Yeah, and basically the cost estimation would try to align with the level of study that each of these are at. There's different range of guidance notes out there for each of these studies, but a scoping study, you're talking quite a broad range, plus or minus sort of 40 to 50%. So that's normally a starting point to assess, the scale of a project.
Okay, and so when we move on to pre-feasibility study, and how does that change?
Again, it's just increasing that accuracy. So you're moving to more a 20 to 25% range is the general guidance. And to get to that level means that your rates that you're using or your inputs need to be probably more current, knowing that costs do move year on year. So, and there's different ways of bringing costs up to today's rates. But a powerful method is talking to a lot of the contractors out there or having a good database of what operating mines are using today.
Okay, and then the feasibility studies where we've kind of decided what's a preferred mining method, and then we want to further optimize or make it more practical. Is that correct?
That's right. I think that the big part of a feasibility study is to lock in accuracy of the scenarios that you've built up through the pre-feas. So you're now looking at a 10 to 15% accuracy. That requires more engagement with your contractors and your on-site, I guess, your real current costing.
Right. So I was reading some materials, and one great example is cost estimation handbook from the AusIMain. And in there, I often come across a couple of terminologies, and one of them is called the basis of estimate, or BOE. So what does that mean, and how do you guys use that?
So basis of estimate documents are normally just having a one place for all these things. At times we're limited to include all of our inputs in a feasibility study or maybe a pre-feas study. So a basis of estimate would be a one place or a one document that you can log all of your assumptions and your inputs, where they come from, and it's also a powerful tool to communicate to your stakeholders and get approval. Do we use these rates? Are these all locked in, and take them forward to the main evaluation.
Cool. And what are the common pitfalls when you do this cost estimation? I assume that's a huge amount of work, and we have a lot of parameters or parameters to collect and estimate.
Yeah, it's probably understanding that every project is different. We have a lot of synergies through the mining industry, but the scale of a project is typically the biggest change from one project to the next. And understanding that rates driven up from a smaller project won't be applicable to a larger and vice versa. So it's understanding are the rates comparable, especially if we're using benchmarked rates, or even if we've approached a contractor that as the study has progressed, have things changed that might influence the costs, and it becomes very cyclic, trying to capture exactly what are the real cost drivers for the project, and what are the costs that you've collected from your various sources.
Okay, and apparently this is a very big topic, and people can talk days on it. And I know Hamish have a lot of experiences on this topic. So if we can only put one sentence to wrap up this episode, what would you want the listeners to take away?
The power and cost estimation is understanding the scale of the project, but it's also understanding what level of accuracy do you need along that study pipeline, knowing that there'll be changes along different levels of study, scoping through to feasibility. So it's good to sort of match the amount of work that you put into cost estimation, so you can still put a lot of effort into different scenarios, and then tighten up on the accuracy as you get closer to the more operational phase, and you really need to tighten up on the accuracy. That's the key to cost estimation.
Thanks, Hamish. It's a great talk. And if you want to listen more of Fresh Thinking podcasts, feel free to check that on most of the mainstream podcast platforms. And stay tuned.